Here with us today, I've got Denise Brookins, City Planner of the City of Fayetteville, Georgia. And I've explained to Denise what we're doing here today, just running through some questions regarding City of Fayetteville's implementation of Bluebeam. And so, as I mentioned, Denise, here at Applied Software, we've noticed an opportunity in the market for municipalities and government entities that are considering e-plan review or going virtual, which is a big step, as I'm sure you're aware, since you all have gone through that. So would love to run through some of these questions and just get a feel for how you all implemented Bluebeam and kind of what your thoughts were around that. So without further ado, Denise, we'll jump in here. So my first question for you is, were you all previously using another program for electronic plan review, or was this your first kind of virtual adoption there at City of Fayetteville?
Well, I think initially we had a software for processing payments and sending out alerts, but nothing that we could use to actually mark up construction documents, plats, and get that same information to the customer, unless we used Adobe. And for the most part, everything was paper copy up until about 6 or 7 months ago.
Sure. Yeah, that's pretty much aligned with the majority of our clients in your space, municipalities and government parties. Pretty much the same thing, and I think the option of being able to go virtual is huge, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's go ahead.
The goal from our leadership team was to, as soon as possible, to go paperless with everything, but we didn't quite have we didn't know the correct software to be able to meet all of our needs, because we have so many different sort of experts in their field looking at very different things, but to be able to have everyone looking at the same document at the same time, and then be able to take all of those comments and all of that critical information and to give that to the customer, and not just, because traditionally when you get a paper copy and you're looking at any type of plans, you are, writing stuff down. The difference I found with Bluebeam was that we were able to show people, okay, this is going to sort of expedite our process. When you can tell a customer, on any particular plan, the issue isn't just, you are not meeting the code. The issue is that on this specific area of your plan, there's some critical information that's missing, or this doesn't meet the code, and we can show you that on your plans. And so they get that. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback from customers who, now have a clearer picture of what the expectation is from them, and we are able to clearly say what we need. So that helps speed up the process, so we don't have to kind of go back and forth and have multiple meetings. A lot of that stuff is missing in communication when you are reviewing a plan and then giving someone general comments back to reference a code that they may not be familiar with, because keep in mind, a lot of the contractors work in various different states. Mm-hmm. So we can say, here's our code, and then it takes them even longer to kind of figure out exactly what we're talking about. But when you can tell someone, okay, the setback is 5 and you are not, and we can clearly see that it's not 5 on this document. It helps all of us give the client a smoother process, and help us, do what we think is most important, which is to get development happening in Fayetteville as quickly as possible.
That's great. Yeah, that's good stuff. Thank you for sharing that. So I think, you've really kind of answered my next question here. But if there's anything else you want to touch on, just kind of from a standpoint of, was there any specific I guess a catalyst, or was there a specific, instance that happened on your end, or just kind of what made you all decide to move to a virtual platform? Anything else you want to share around that?
Well, I think our leadership team had some experiences talking to other local governments who had a paperless review process. So they were very much interested in it, but we couldn't quite put our hands on, I think, the right software to give us exactly where we wanted to. And even when we had Bluebeam, I think for the longest time, I think Calvin can attest to this, that we had some folks who were just very passionate about paper. And they, you know, to their minds, I have to be in an office, I have to have my paper copy down, and that's the best way to do it. Yep. Well, catalyst for us was the pandemic, because we couldn't be in the office, and we didn't have the paper copies. You know, as much as possible, we were trying to make sure that there was limited interaction for everyone's safety. But we also wanted to do the business of making sure that all of the construction documents that were coming in were being processed quickly and efficiently, without us actually being able to be in the same space.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. How were you introduced to Bluebeam? Was somebody else there, another city planner or somebody else that you worked with that mentioned Bluebeam? Or, because I know you mentioned it there briefly, but was it more of an internal kind of source or outside influence?
That was Calvin. Calvin has been here longer, so he knows when kind of the Bluebeam introduction was made. I've been with the city, I think it's like 6 or 7 months now, and previously I had never heard of or never worked with Bluebeam. So I was kind of like, okay, what is this? How do we use it? Like, how is it going to be helpful? And, you know, for me, I'm pretty techie. So the transition of using any kind of software was a little bit easier for me. So I felt like the onus on my part, not necessarily being the expert on Bluebeam, but being more comfortable to technology and also managing the plan review process, was to not just get comfortable with it for myself, but to also set up any kind of training opportunities. Luckily for us, our engineer, who is contracted and actually works in the private sector, and all of his process in Bluebeam. So between the two of us, we were able to get some initial training to at least get everybody on board and, you know, using it like in a fairly quickly pace.
Right.
So we didn't have the luxury of just saying, okay, we can all come together, let's meet and let's do 4 or 5 weeks of training. We had an additional, like earlier in the year, we had a day training. And I can say the training was great, but I couldn't remember any of it when I got back to my desk and had like all these other things that were happening. So it's one of those things where once you sit down and kind of just play with it, it's pretty easy to pick up on.
It is a very intuitive piece of software. That's one of the things we hear most often is, you know, anyone who's got any sort of technical experience in dealing with software, or really Adobe, you know, if you've got any experience in a program like that, you can pick up Bluebeam pretty easily. So yeah, absolutely. Denise, would you happen to know what internal disciplines or departments there are using Bluebeam currently? Is it mainly around plan examining or building code? Are there other departments that are using Bluebeam that may be outside of the box a little bit, or is it pretty much the people you would expect?
Well, I think pretty much the people you would expect on our plan review team is for development plans or construction plans, not building plans yet. We are in the process of integrating it into the building plan review process. But the fire marshal, the building official, the public services director, the community development director, myself and the other senior planner, we are all using Bluebeam for all plan review.
Great. Yeah, and you mentioned a few different disciplines there. Are there any other outside partners that aren't necessarily directly affiliated with the city? Any other, you know, design firms or engineers that you all work with that are also using Bluebeam?
Yeah, actually, even before we got started, a lot of the companies we were working with and you know, reviewing plans for were using Bluebeam. So in the private sector, it's actually, I think, a lot more common than the public sector.
Yeah. Yeah. And this next question, you kind of, you alluded to it a little bit there a minute ago. You know, one of the biggest hurdles that we have to cross when we're discussing Bluebeam with a potential, you know, new client or new adopter is that resistance to change, right? That just status quo. Nobody wants to change what they're currently doing. But sometimes, you know, change is necessary. You have to grow. You have to continue to, you know, keep up with with what's going on in the industry. And so you mentioned there may have been some obstacles there. You guys experienced some obstacles with your implementation. Is that correct?
Definitely. Trying to figure out, because our structure is a little bit different in that we have a outside engineer who provides all of our services and reviews all of our plans for anything related to engineering. So he is not connected to or comes in the office every day. So there was that challenge of trying to make sure that we could get him, everything he needed to review. The challenge internally was just folks being a little bit more comfortable with paper copies and just being, the process was something they had been doing for years. And not to say that it, wasn't working, but if you can show people that there's a process that can save you a little bit more time and give you a little bit more space in your day to work on the other priority areas, I think that's probably it took a minute to show folks that and convincing.
Yeah.
It really, at one point I started coming up with web videos that I could show her, here's how quickly we can do it. And it definitely wasn't one of those structured processes where we decided one day we were going to use Bluebeam and these were the steps we were going to take. It was more like, okay, we have to use Bluebeam. It's been around for a little bit, so we need everyone to kind of jump on really, really quickly. And I think for smaller governments like ours, it's just if you have one person who's a little bit more comfortable, then that person has sort of become the go-to person and the quasi-trainer, just so that you can get the basics out. And if you can get the basics out, and you can tell people, hey, I just need you to go into this document, look at it, add a text box, and you're done. It's really that simple. That kind of helped people breathe a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. And and it took a little bit of the pressure off of me, because I'm like, I don't need you to be an expert in how to do everything in Bluebeam. I just need you to be able to go in, find the information that you are trying to validate that meets the letter of the law here. And if you can do that, we're all good. So after that, they took a deep breath. I was like, oh, okay, well, this is easy.
That is such a great point, because I think so many times, Bluebeam can do a lot. There is so much in Bluebeam. I think I even heard, in speaking with some of the leadership over there at Bluebeam, that the majority of users are only using between 40 and 50% of what Bluebeam can actually do. Right. So it's like it can do so much. It's such a robust tool, but you're at a point where if you've got a certain discipline, right? And if you can just focus in on what your job is and how Bluebeam can be utilized to make that job easier, to save time, help you to be more effective, then, it can really serve a major purpose. And I think what you just said is spot on. So yeah, it's great information. We'll kind of shift gears here a little bit I want to talk about some of the features within Bluebeam, just a few, and see if y'all are diving into any of this or not, just to get an idea of what governments may be using Bluebeam for. So the first feature I want to talk about here is the studio projects. Mm-hmm. So do you all use studio projects for data management or file storage?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay. And then do you use studio projects for your internal team members, maybe in conjunction with external project partners, or do you use it? Because I know there's sometimes can be with government, it can be a lot of securities around what you share, what you put out there. Mm-hmm. So are you all are there certain restrictions around what you share with your external project partners, or kind of what does that look like on your end?
Well, it depends on the nature of the project. If there are any regulations that require that we don't share that information with any members of the general public without a public records request, because everything we have is open to the public for the most part. Mm-hmm. We do use the permission settings. Great. So that we send a email to that person saying, this is your specific link that you could use. If it's for just a regular document that we know for sure is anyone can come at any point and just say, hey, I need to see these particular plans. Those we have mission setting is a little bit more open, just in case, because we know in our building department, in case anyone wants to, who is not sort of the official reviewer, wants to use it, and they just need to go in and look at something, we want to be able to make sure that we can quickly get that link to them and they can go into the document and be able to kind of go through it quickly, get their review done, or add whatever notes that they want to add. And for our external partners, there have been some instances where we've had reviews that required a couple more meetings. And so during those meetings early on, we would send them an invitation to the session. And they are not, working for the city of Fayetteville at all. These are just engineers, architects, and they can go in and look at the document before the meeting. And then in the meeting, we are all looking at the same document on the television and kind of going through it page by page and talking through everything. Or the perfect example with the pandemic is that if we had to meet with someone and we were on a Zoom call, then we could pull up Bluebeam and kind of go through everything together at 3 different states. So.
Yeah, that's a huge selling point, and it's such a great feature with Bluebeam. Kind of leads me into my next feature here, the studio session. So, we have seen a huge jump in usage of studio sessions, and obviously, when people are being forced to work remote or from home, you need some sort of collaborative tool to help you through your plan review and continue to work through those projects. So can you speak a little bit to City of Fayetteville's usage of studio sessions, and has that been valuable for you all, especially through a time like this?
It's been incredible. We have been able to work with anyone, anywhere. And so for the most part, a lot of the contractors and architects, if they're not local, we used to have we still have a day we set aside specifically to communicate with anyone doing any type of development in the city, and they can come in and talk about any construction project. And so I think it's been invaluable to our customers because they can save a great deal of time on flights. You don't have to fly in. You can just jump on the call, pull up Bluebeam, the session, we'll send you the invite, and you can go in and talk about it at the same time and be all, looking at the same document. And we're able to kind of add that feature where you can add documents. So if there's something that they, said, hey, we submitted this, and we're like, well, we don't see it, and they can go in and add it to the session, and we're able to clear up any confusion live in a meeting.
Yeah.
So it helps with communication. It helps, being able to be competitive with anyone, anywhere, because our reviews are fast. Our process is it's a bit old school in that we do take on a heavy amount of communication and making sure that we are actively talking to all of our customers, applicants, anyone who has any questions. We want to make sure that we have an open door policy. But when you look at the pandemic, you can't really have an open door policy, but you can still communicate and work with everyone. It's
exactly.
Just on a different platform.
Absolutely. Yes. Well put. So, again, Denise, I really appreciate your time through all this. Couple of, final questions here. So for any other government, municipality, whatever it may be that are, considering Bluebeam for e-plan review, maybe they've got some sort of initiative to consider going paperless. What would you want them to know? It can be good, it can be not so good. Any specific feature workflow? I know we've kind of talked through some of the features, the studio sessions and some of the things that you all have done to get through a time like this, but even outside of a pandemic, when everybody's forced to work in this environment, what would you say? Good, bad, indifferent? Any sort of implementation suggestions, or just what would you want to let other governments know that are considering Bluebeam?
Well, that it's easy software to use. No matter the size or function, you're able to, pretty quickly integrate the system into your review process. But just keep in mind, Bluebeam is a tool. So you still have to, communicate with people and work work with a lot of different folks in a lot of different areas, but the process is just a little bit smoother and more efficient from my experience. If you can just connect everyone with the right tools to get the job done. And for us, Bluebeam is that tool. And it's been invaluable. I just take your time. You don't have to know every single feature in Bluebeam for it to be useful. Just figure out kind of what you need and what works for your organization size, and just, hit the ground running, because that's what we did.
That's great. That's great information, Denise. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing that with us and giving us some time here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out.